And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another YouTube video. And in this case, I'm doing a video that's going to be added to my little known comics you should try playlist. Now, I've already done a video in this playlist, which similarly was a little known comic that I would recommend to people. And so today I thought I'd do another one, given that was reasonably well received. The last one was a DC comic. It was Superman for Tomorrow, and this one actually is also set at DC Comics, but I really felt it's worth, whilst it's not a little known publisher, it's worth highlighting some of the comics that they produce sometimes that get overlooked. And in this case, I want to talk about Real Worlds. Now, Real Worlds was a comic book series or series of one-shots that was published by DC in the year 2000. They were all published in the same year. It's important to realize here that Real Worlds is totally separate to Elseworlds. It sounds similar. It sounds like thematically these things would be parallel or linked to one another, but that is not the case. The thing about Elseworlds, and I talked about this in much more detail in one of my other videos in my Vocabulary of Comics series, is that Elseworlds is about multiverses. It's about there being an alternate reality where something is different. So, for example, Superman as a child lands in Russia instead of in Kansas, and therefore he is raised as a communist, and that sort of stuff is essentially a divergent or parallel universe with a divergent or parallel timeline. Real Worlds is completely different to that. It's not about parallel universes. Real Worlds is a little bit like the concept, I suppose, of something like Kick-Ass, if you're familiar with the film or the comic series there, in that it's about people reading the comic books that we read. In other words, it's about, not to be too obvious about it, the real world. It's about people in our modern day, in places like London, New York, wherever, who read comics by a company called DC Comics that are about characters that don't exist, like Batman and Superman and so on. And so, in that sense, I guess it's a metatextual commentary on comic readers rather than comic characters. But listen, I don't want to dive into pretentious language and this kind of deconstruction. So, what I want to talk about is just these comics. They're very little, they're little known or they're very much overlooked. But I think they're really, really good. I read them this year for the first time and I was blown away. Given that no one ever mentions them and I literally just happened to stumble across them, they're really good. But listen, I'm getting ahead of myself. What exactly is Real Worlds? It's the umbrella title for four, and it is only four of them, one shots that are set in our world. And like I say, published in the year 2000 and exploring the impact that some of the company's more popular heroes have had on everyday people. As I said, there's four issues. They're oversized in format in the sense that they're about 40 pages long, give or take, and they're a prestige format, so like kind of square bound spine and stuff if you dig them out. The first one we'll look at, the one I suppose everyone cares about, which is Batman. So this is an issue called Real World's Batman, and the story itself is called The Dynamic Duo. It's really cool. It's about a young man who clearly has some kind of learning difficulties, potentially autistic, who essentially leads a really thorough fantasy life, kind of viewing himself as Batman and trying to help his neighborhood and working in his neighborhood. And it's about his interaction with both the people that he lives with and the people that he lives around, but also a childhood friend of his called Clarissa, who in his mind he dubs as Robin, and he's trying to protect her from the evil influences of her boyfriend, who's a drug dealer, who in his mind again he kind of dubs as the Joker. It's got lots of little cool things like that. For example, he psychologically he views his landlord Mike as being Alfred. He has someone who is in neighborhood who plays along with this, who essentially pretends to be Catwoman, and things like that. It's kind of cool. It's kind of sweet. It's very clever, and I'm going to be honest, it hit me right in the feels. I was reading it and I got really caught up in the story, really felt for this guy. Um, it was really nice. So this guy's called Charlie, the main character, and it was just really sweet, really powerful, really impactful story. And I was utterly shocked at how much I liked it. Let's move on. Another issue in this real world series of one shots is Return of the Justice League. Again, complete standalone, and all of these are standalone. You can read them in literally any order. I'm just doing a random order here. Return of the Justice League is about four childhood friends who used to play as like Justice League characters like Batman and Wonder Woman, etc., etc. And it's about them as adults, kind of being reunited and kind of being forced to recollect and revisit their childhood experiences and kind of look at them both through the lens of their adult perspective, but also to then revisit and re-examine their adult lives through the lens of their childish perspective and the way they looked at things when they were children. It's really good. Again, it hit me right in the feels. It's what's the best way to describe it? I guess it feels a little bit like the movie It by Stephen King, but without the horror and the clown and that sort of stuff, and just with that singular artifice or that singular gimmick of you're looking at children interacting, and then suddenly you're seeing them 20 years later getting back together for the first time and interacting. And it's just really interesting and fun to explore that dynamic, and all through the lens in both cases of their interest, devotion, and fandom of DC characters from the Justice League. So that was a really interesting issue, and I really enjoyed it. The next one, Mark of Superman. I genuinely didn't know where this story was going. I saw the cover and I thought, right, this is going to be something about some kind of Clark Kentish character and so on. No, total bait and switch. I'm not going to spoil it, but again, it hits you in the feels. It's a real kind of interesting morality tale and morality dissection of, to an extent, power corrupting, and also, about how people can deify and idolize symbols like the Superman S shield in the wrong way, and sometimes take the wrong messages away from it, and sometimes then take the right messages away from it. Again, really interesting story, really interesting character. Works perfectly as a standalone, but I've got to say, just great. And the framing mechanism of the entire story, which frames it as a reminiscence or a retrospective, is one that works extremely well. Last but not least, we have Wonder Woman. This story arc was called Wonder Woman versus the Red Menace. And basically, it's weird. Again, not to use pretentious or sort of deconstructive language. It's again a kind of a meta-textual deconstruction of the character, because it's about a rising Hollywood star called Brenda Kelly, I think, who basically dresses up and plays as Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman movies, but then ends up being depicted as a Wonder Woman kind of ancillary character or promotion device. In a lot of ways, similar to how Captain America was promoted in a lot of the film The First Avenger, just promoted as an idea rather than as a real superhero. And of course, she's not a real superhero, she's just a normal person. But it's really interesting in kind of seeing what it does to someone to kind of play that role on the silver screen. This was probably the weakest of all four of them. However, it was still well worth reading and it was really strong. Um, as a whole, I'll say these four were great. I really wish they were collected in some way, a trade paperback, or to be honest, they deserve the deluxe hardcover treatment because they're great. All four of them are great. Part of me is kind of gutted that DC never revisited this idea, but then part of me is quite glad about it because I don't want them beating a dead horse with this. Like the four stories they've done are great. They work brilliantly as standalones. It's great to read all four of them, and I'm glad that they didn't spin this out and milk it for more than it was worth. Yeah, so there we have it. The four single one shots that I never hear anyone talking about, and to be honest, I've never heard anyone mention these ever. But these are the DC Real Worlds one shots from the year 2000, not to be confused with Elseworlds, and definitely not part of DC continuity. However, really fascinating dissections of the various DC characters: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and then the Justice League as a whole. I thought it was really interesting. I'm really glad I read them. I've read about 1,000 DC issues so far this year, probably more, maybe about 1,500. And these four are the best four that I've read by a memorable and notable margin. And it occurred to me when I was thinking of the next idea to do for a little known comics you should try video, I thought, here's one that no one ever mentions. Try and track them down. A little bit tricky because they're not available in trades or in any kind of collector's edition at all, which is a crime, frankly. But please do try and track them down. Do try and read them. I'd love to hear what other people think about them. From my point of view, I found them really sort of interesting and thought provoking and really evocative of something I remember Henry Cavill saying once, where Henry Cavill was talking about what it was to play the character of Superman on the silver screen. And what he said really kind of struck a chord with me. He talks about the responsibility it is to be Superman or to portray Superman for a generation of younger people and to be the ideal they look up to. And that you feel that even as someone playing the character, but even as an actor in your own life, that it changes you and it makes you think of the ideal that you should live up to. I thought that was really powerful, and I think that feeling, that sense of appreciating and admiring and respecting and being inspired by characters that may not be real but still feel larger than life. I think that really came through in these four issues. So the one thing I would say to you guys, please, if you can, check them out. If you see them somewhere in a secondhand shop or in a charity shop, pick them up, check them out. It'd be great to hear what you guys think. Um, so until the next time, that is a little known series of comics that you should try. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.